when you look at the history of the NBA, it's clear to see that it's a league that's been dominated by Americans and Americans alone. But as we move into the modern era, and we move into a time where it's a sport that is recognized by countries all over the world, and the NBA is watched by people from every walk of life from all four corners, the league has changed, and now we see that international players are starting to take over and look like players who will be the ones that will dominate for ages to come. And you can look back as far as the 1980s, as when the likes of Hakeem Olajuwon and Patrick Ewing were both drafted in consecutive years in 1984 and 1985. And then you move into the 90s when the likes of Dirk Nowitzki and Detlef Schrempf were drafted. And then you look into the 2000s when the likes of Pau Gasol, Yao Ming, Andrew Bogut, and Andrea Bargnani were all drafted within the top 10. And now you look at 2021 when the NBA has a roster that features 107 international players from 41 countries and a record of 17 Canadian players and a record tie-in of 14 players from rosters this season. And while previously in the past, many of those players would be players that were on the bench or players that would be role players that may not get a lot of minutes compared to others, this has clearly changed with us now seeing that the likes of Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid were both the MVP and runner-up for this season. And you look at Joel Embiid, who's the face of his franchise in Philadelphia, and as a player who dominates in the post and is arguably one of the best big men since Shaquille O'Neal, it's clear to see why he is seen as such a great talent. And then you look at the reigning MVP in Nikola Jokic. He's a guy who led the NBA in his position and averaged 24.6 points, 10.8 rebounds and 8.6 assists. And looking at him as a passer, it's very arguable to say that we haven't seen someone that's as good as a passing center as we have in him, with him surpassing the likes of Bill Walton, Arvydas Sabonis, and even Bill Russell in that regard. And you can see that in his play. Whenever Jokic gets in the post and he gets down low, while many may think he may look to go for a post up or hook and some sort of shot, he's able to pass out of the post and find his players available to get wide open shots and put them in the best possible position to score. And that's what makes him such a dangerous threat and one of the best players in the league at the moment. And while Jokic and Embiid may be number one and number two in the MVP race for last season, you just have to look for the two previous seasons before that to look at another international player who has made his mark on the game. Our reigning Finals MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis had another MVP type season this year, averaging 28 points, 11 rebounds and 5.9 assists, along to go with 1.2 steals and 1.2 blocks. And we can see that in the previous two MVP seasons that we had before, his stats for this previous season just almost made it hard for him to even win a third one, with him doing everything he could. It gave a lot of people doubt into what else he could do to make him three-time MVP. But he put that all to the side in the playoffs and proved why many people see him as one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world, averaging 30 points and 12 rebounds per game to lead his team to their first ever NBA title in this modern era since he's been with the team. And we could see that even in the game-clinching finals, Game 6, he was absolutely dominant, showing why he is someone who is feared among the league and why he is a top 3 player in the NBA. Looking at a player that hasn't won the MVP awards that both Giannis and Jokic have won, but is looking like he is well on his way to doing this and looking like a player who could be the face of the league in a few years to come, is Luka Doncic. Playing from Real Madrid since the age of 16, Luka has been a player who has been gifted the skills to grow up in an environment where he was taught all the right things to do and taught all the things that have made him a great player. Growing up in Spain and growing up in that system which taught him his fundamentals with his passing and his ability to get to the line and his ability to create space for both him and his teammates, he was able to win both EuroLeague MVP and both EuroLeague Finals MVP, along with that title, being one of the best talents that we've ever seen come into the NBA. And while the likes of the Phoenix Suns and the Sacramento Queens may have downplayed his achievements and made him and others doubt what he was possible to do, this simply isn't true, as since coming into the league, Luka has been amazing, averaging 27.7 points, 8.0 rebounds and 8.6 assists in his last season that we saw. And coming into the summer that we just saw, this isn't something that is just suited to the NBA, as during the Olympics, Luka averaged around 26 points, 10 rebounds and 8.6 assists, while dragging his Slovenia team, which had previously never made the Olympics, made the semi-finals, unfortunately finishing in 4th place, not being able to get a medal. And when you look at the likes of Luka Doncic, if he was to grow up inside of America, many people would have stereotyped him as being too slow, too fat, and not being able to make the NBA with the body that he has. But in the development that he had inside Spain, people were able to teach him what he could do and teach him how to play the game correctly. And this can be seen in why development in other FIBA nations is worlds ahead, better than the AAU development that is told inside of the American basketball system. And this can be seen in many times when you look at the way that they play inside the NCAA and the way that AAU basketball is taught, with the kids being told to rely on their athleticism and being told to have good handles rather than worrying about court vision, knowing how to throw a proper pass and knowing how to run certain plays as a playmaker. Speaking on this, the late great Kobe Bryant said, "I just think European players are way more skillful. They just taught the game at a right way at an early age. They're more skillful. It's something we really have to fix. We really have to address that. We have to teach our kids the right way." And this is simply true, with the fact that when you look at most of the best players that are high in regards for draft boards and players that look like they could be drafted, most of the things that they are always seen on those reports is their athleticism, how good of the shooter they are, and things that are just not really intangibles, not things that show that they have the mind for the game. Things about, can they dunk well, how well can they do crossovers, and this is the worst part of the game because it doesn't teach them how to play properly. And this can also be seen in the FIBA rules, when the fact that the game is much harder to play there, so the players who grew up in FIBA development are able to be a bit more disciplined and understand the game way more. Speaking on this, the likes of Damian Lillard said early in August, a lot of the best scorers in the NBA, they score from free and they're able to get to the rim and get fouled. And when you look at that compared to FIBA rules, that isn't simply possible. So the likes of the fouls that James Harden and Trae Young commit just aren't taught in FIBA, so they don't know how to use those, so they have to find more interesting ways to get calls. Also, speaking on Lillard also said, in FIBA there's not as many foul calls. You're going to get away with a lot of more, it's more physical. Also, there's no defensive 3-second violation, so the paint is usually more crowded. Forcing into the paint, usually by playing into the crowd, the referees aren't going to give you the benefit of the doubt with a whistle. And it's hard to play in a crowd, to score in a crowd of people who are just sitting there and paint. That's tough. And I definitely think it makes it harder to score in FIBA as opposed to the NBA, when there's a lot less contact allowed and defensive 3 seconds. There's so many things that are different that allow the scoring to be a bit easier in the NBA. And that's simply true. I mean, when you look at the fact that someone like Trae Young can get to the rim and can just get contact and can take 15 free throws in a certain game, along with James Harden, it's easy to see why it is more harder to score in FIBA, as when you look at the paint, if there's no 3-second defensive violation, you have the likes of someone like Rudy Gobert or Clint Capella, or even Giannis if he's playing point center, in the rim pretty much at all times, stopping someone from just being there. And you can see that's what makes someone like Luka so skillful when it comes to him getting to the rim. Speaking on Luka, he said about the NBA's rules compared to FIBA's. Here in the NBA, it's easier to score compared to Europe, of course. In Europe, I think the court is smaller, and here the 3 seconds rules, I think it's easier to score here. And this can also be seen in Australia as well, when you look at players like Ben Simmons, Dante Exum, Josh Giddey, and even LaMelo Ball, who played over in Australia before heading to the NBA. And when you look at this overall, the future does look a bit more bleak for America compared to Europe with the young talent that comes into the league. You look at someone like LeBron James, who is arguably the greatest player of all time and is one of the most dominated superstars we have ever seen, is nearing 37 years of age. And when you look at the players who could possibly take his spotlight as the best player of the world, you look at someone like Anthony Davis. While he is a great player, Davis is often injured and he can't really stay healthy enough for him to put a stamp on the league, and really hasn't been that sort of dominator. When you look at someone like Steph Curry was supposed to be that guy, but he is 33 years and it doesn't look like he would be the sort of person that will have a long career where he will almost can keep this up while being a face of the league. The same thing with Kawhi Leonard, who has yet to play a full season in the league since he played for the San Antonio Spurs due to his injuries. And when you look at the future MVPs, shout out to Hoops and Brews and Pavi for inspiring me for this. They discussed this about players who possibly could be MVPs who are under 30. The most likely candidates are the likes of Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, and Luka Doncic. 4 players who don't come from the Americas. And when you look at the likes of future MVPs that could come from America, you look at Zion Williamson, but the New Orleans Pelicans aren't a winning team. They don't have that winning mentality at the moment. And when you look at all the things that Zion does as a player, Giannis does it a lot better, especially with the defense that he brings, and he's able to defend a lot more people. So you don't really see it coming from someone like Zion. When you look at Trae Young, he would have to finish at least at the first seed in the Eastern Conference and have a team around him which would be able to support all the defensive liabilities that he brings to the court, and along with that have a absurd offensive season, something of the likes of even better than Steph Curry had in his unanimous MVP season. And like Zion, there's an international player that does it better, and that's Luka Doncic. When you look at someone like Jason Tatum, while he is a superstar, again like Trae Young, he would have to improve upon his team's finishing in the Eastern Conference, with them almost certainly having to finish first in the Eastern Conference. He would also have to improve his shooting percentages and his defense. And then with someone like him, there may have to be a story involved, something which helps the narrative. When you look at someone like Devin Booker, he is a good player and he does bring a lot to the table. But like the other 2 players, his team will almost certainly have to finish first in the Western Conference this time. Also, a storyline may be needed for him, with a narrative possibly wanting people to vote towards him. And he would also have to improve his efficiency on the court, as it is something that we have seen Booker struggling in the playoffs as well as the regular season. And then when you look at some of the younger people like LaMelo Ball, he would obviously have to improve his game all the way around, become a top seed within the Eastern Conference, and just the team around him be better, so that with his best ability, which is passing, that allowing him to show why he's so good and why he could be a MVP in this league. So with this, it is scary to look at the players that do have all those skills and why the best of them are in the international stage. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and peace.